most African nations that were getting their independences, so-called independences, that was happening towards the end of the late 50s, early 60s. Right around that time is when we had socialism being like, it was the ideology en vogue. Any respectable intellectual was socialist. Only crazies and nuts were not socialist. So that was the ideology en vogue at that time. People need to remember that. At the same time, it was traditionally Marxist socialists that have been fighting for racial equality back in those times. Remember, African nations haven't had their independences yet, right? So the Marxist socialists were the ones who were fighting for racial equality. If you were just to start with slavery, but I will always say we had people in Africa before slavery, so I always look back at that time. But in this case, colonization was about to end. Before that, there was slavery, and then I think before that, most people forgot that we were free people. But anyway, here you are. Put yourself into the mental mindset. Here they are. And with these two ideologies butting head with each other, on one end here, freedom represented by the Western nations, and their economic system was capitalism, facing off with the other bloc that's promoting various forms of statism, the Eastern Bloc for the most part. And they're looking for influence because that's how you win. That's what ideology looks for, always, to influence. The more you influence people, you're going to win, right? And then you can proceed to implement. So these two ideologies were at the height of a battle. Meanwhile, we had the Soviet Union telling the world that communism was working. All the lies that we found out were lies afterwards. So between the fact that Marxist socialists have been the one facing for racial equality, the fact that looking at the psychological mindset and thinking to themselves, you, the West, have colonized us. We're still colonized by you. If you think we're going to buy your ideology, no way. And so they sided with the other side. And also the fact that at that time, anybody serious was a socialist. So when you put those three factors together, what happened? The African liberators, because we had many people fighting for their African countries to be liberated in Tanzania, or Kenya, in my country, everywhere. You had people fighting. The air must have been so electric to see that the largest colonized nation is about to get its independence from the largest colonizer in the world, Great Britain in this case. So eventually they sided with the Marxist socialists. And that's how most of African nations, as becoming these free nations, were run by, for the most part, Marxist socialists. Even the ones that were not supposedly socialists, like Nigeria, for example, still were running 5-year plans, which is hardly super capitalist. So they would say, oh no, we're not socialists, but definitely not like, you don't have a level of capitalism that's going to be needed to thrive. And so this has been, Kevin, tragedy. At that important fork of our life, we took the wrong fork, that time of our life. And then, of course, nothing to show for it. 60 some plus years later, here we are talking about Africa being poor.